mi alrededor.
Uno es peor que esto. Ahí ya no pasa nada. Ahí ya van, pues se quedan ahí. Mira aquel coche de allá, Lucía, mira aquel coche de allá cómo va.
En esta planta, que es lo que me está ayudando a cogerme, pero mirad, no hay nada a mi alrededor. Estoy como si estuviera en medio del mar.
Tendrás dinero ya por nacer, según el...
Y de la acera de la derecha.
People are dead and hundreds trapped after flash flooding in Spain. These are live pictures from the region. Emergency services estimate almost all of the deaths are in Valencia. The flooding took over southeast Spain after yesterday's storms. Now 1,000 troops are joining the emergency response to help with search and rescue efforts. Foreign correspondent Marcus Moore has the latest. Hi, Marcus.
Hi, Diane. What we have heard from officials in Spain is to prepare for the death toll to rise significantly as urgent search and rescue operations unfold throughout the day today. And most of the deaths that we know of are reported in the city of Valencia. This flash flooding happening in eastern Spain overnight, washing away cars and causing mudslides. Andalusia and Valencia regions are under red alerts right now. And we have seen images of the floodwaters rushing down streets. Also, the massive emergency response, 1,000 military forces deployed to help. Rescuers using helicopters to pluck people from flooded villages. Others helped out of their homes on foot. Now, officials told ABC News that at one point, more than 600 people were trapped in an IKEA store in Valencia waiting for help. We know that 2 bridges have been swept away in the Ribarroja de Turia area that's northwest of Valencia, and there are concerns that several key roads could collapse. You know, you look at these images, and you get a real sense that this is a catastrophe, so much so that the train services in that part of the region have been suspended, and Valencia's main airport is closed. And as search and rescues continue, the threat has not passed. Even more rain is expected, and 3 days of national mourning have now been called for everyone impacted.
Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises to the Most High Yahweh, 𝙑𝙤 𝙑𝙖 𝙑𝙤 𝙑𝙗. Before we get into this lesson about why Spain, specifically Valencia, Spain, is going through all of its biblical destruction. We're going to discuss what has brought them to this point today, because their ancestors are guilty of some things. And today, they have to face the consequences for what their ancestors have done. So first and foremost, it was the Roman Catholic Church that gave the King of Spain the authority to institute perpetual slavery under the edict of the, quote, document of discovery, as well as the Inquisition, for the purposes which were, 1, to force by means of torture and death the acceptance of their new religion called Christianity, which is interchangeable with their better known description of Catholicism. The root word being Catholic or Catholic means universal. And what the implication is, the teaching of which is to make the Hebrew scriptures universal to the Gentiles of the world. This is what has happened under the Roman Catholic Church. And 2, to persecute those Israelites, referred to as the Jews, or so-called, they'll say the ish word in these articles. We're going to correct that. In most literature about the subject, to accept their new Roman religion or be dispossessed of their homes, dispossessed of their lands, dispossessed of their finances, all as precursors to either torture or murder, in addition to the option receive fines and eventual expulsion from the entire country by an established date. Okay, these are the two devils, these two deceivers that initiated their Spanish Inquisition against the Israelites and Moors. Now, the word Moor means black or dark skin. That's all it means. And because I don't like reading these articles about all the evil perpetrated upon our people, I'm going to use another form of reading augmentation in this lesson.
Ferdinand and Isabella, the marriage that unified Spain. The Kingdom of Spain charts its origin in the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella in 1469. Their union and their rule triggered a war that forged the modern world. May 31, 2022 by Charles J. Lockett, M.A. in Politics, B.A. in History and Politics. The marriage of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile is one of the most masterful pieces of political theater in history. It was far from a love story, while, by all accounts, Ferdinand and Isabella were a cordial and possibly even happy couple. Their union was the accumulation of hundreds of years of Spanish history, forged by war and intrigue into a dynastic union that laid the foundations for the modern Spanish state. This is the tale of the Catholic monarchs of Spain. Intrigue means make secret plans to do something illicit or detrimental to someone, in this case, the persecution. Threats of torture and death, loss of property, land, and finances. A search for historical information on Valencia, Spain's role in the persecution of Israelites and Moors, as some were also Israelites, renders the following. Valencia, Spain, epicenter of the Inquisition against Israelites and Moors by the Roman Catholic Church. Valencia, Spain was a significant location for the Spanish Inquisition due to its large Muslim and Jewish, should read, Israelite, populations. The Inquisition was a judicial institution that lasted from 1478 to 1834 and was intended to combat heresy in Spain. The heresy here is simply not accepting the Roman Catholic Church teachings. However, it was used to consolidate power for the monarchy and resulted in widespread suffering and death. Here are some ways the Spanish Inquisition impacted Valencia. Trials and executions. Between 1484 and 1530, 91.6% of those judged in Valencia were of Jewish, should read, Israelite, origin. Forced conversion. In 1526, Muslims in Valencia and Aragon were forced to convert to Christianity, and Islam was banned in Spain. Persecution of Moriscos, or those that converted to Roman Catholic Christianity upon threats of loss of property, land, finances, and upon threats of either torture or death. The Inquisition targeted Spanish Muslims who had previously converted to Christianity. In 1566, Philip II prohibited expressions of Morisco culture, meaning Israelite culture, such as practice of Sabbath, hygiene practices, circumcision of male children, as well as observances of holy and high holy days. By 1614, about 300,000 Moriscos, or Israelite and more converts, had been expelled from Spain. Regional nature of the Inquisition. The Inquisition in Valencia was intensely regional, reflecting the place and society. Repeat, the Inquisition in Valencia was intensely regional, reflecting the place and society. The Spanish Inquisition was suppressed permanently in 1834 by Spanish Queen Regent Maria Cristina de Borbón. Our next source is the Encyclopedia Britannica. The title of the document is Spanish Inquisition Key Facts. Spanish Inquisition Key Facts. Written and fact-checked by the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica. The Spanish Inquisition was a judicial institution that lasted between 1478 and 1834. Its ostensible purpose was to combat heresy in Spain, but, in practice, it resulted in consolidating power in the monarchy of the newly unified Spanish kingdom. Its brutal methods led to widespread death and suffering. Note, the heresy spoken of here is the refusal to accept and practice Roman Catholic Christianity. The Roman Catholic Church had established inquisitions in the past. Taking their name from the Latin verb inquiro, inquire into, these commissions had authority to question supposed heretics about their religious practices and loyalties starting in the 13th century. Unlike much of Western Europe at the time, medieval Spain was a multiracial and multi-religious country with large Muslim and Jewish, Israelite, populations. The Alhambra. The Alhambra is a palace and fortress overlooking the town of Granada in Spain. It was home to the Moors who ruled parts of Spain from the AD 700s to 1492. Note, the term Moor is a late antique and medieval Western European usage to indicate dark-skinned North Africans of Arab and or Berber origin who were responsible for the invasion of Spain in 711 CE and the establishment of its flourishing Islamic culture, which lasted from the 8th through the 15th centuries. Moors, members of the Muslim population of Spain and Portugal, ruled most of the Iberian Peninsula starting in the 8th century. Christian states spent several centuries working to expel the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula, a campaign called the Reconquista, or the Reconquest. Repeat, Christian states spent several centuries working to expel the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula, a campaign called the Reconquista, or the Reconquest. The last Moorish kingdom in Spain was conquered in the late 15th century. Many historians believe that the crusading spirit of the Reconquista was preserved in the subsequent Spanish emphasis on religious uniformity, or the forcible acceptance of the Roman Catholic new religion of Christianity. Anti-Semitic sentiment grew toward Spain's substantial Jewish, Israelite, population. During the reign of Henry III of Castile and Leon, 1390 to 1406, Jews, Israelites, faced increased persecution. Pogroms in 1391 were especially brutal, and the Jewish, Israelites, community faced the choice between baptism and death. Many Jews, Israelites, were killed upon refusal to convert to Christianity. Those who adopted Christian beliefs, the conversos, Spanish for converted, still faced suspicion and prejudice. Morenos, Jews, Israelites, who had apparently converted but continued to practice their faith in secret, were considered a major threat to Spanish society. Ferdinand and Isabella Ferdinand II left, and his wife, Isabella I, relief with guilt and polychromy by Alonso de Mina, 1632, in the Capilla Real, Granada, Spain. The marriage of Ferdinand II and Isabella I in 1469 united the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile. Called the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella further united the Spanish kingdoms into an imperial force. In 1478 Pope Sixtus IV issued a papal bull, or decree, authorizing the Catholic monarchs to name inquisitors in order to enforce religious uniformity and to expel Jews, Israelites, from Spain. Repeat, to enforce religious uniformity and to expel Jews, Israelites, from Spain. Ferdinand and Isabella sought to use the Inquisition to increase their absolute power over the centralized regime. The first Spanish inquisitors were so severe in their methods that Sixtus attempted to intervene, but his efforts were in vain as Ferdinand and Isabella realized how useful the Inquisition was to their royal power. Torture during the Inquisition. Suspected Protestants and insincere Christians being tortured in the name of Christianity during the Spanish Inquisition. The Inquisition was characterized by secret procedures, the use of torture during interrogation, and the complete lack of rights for the accused. The autos de fe, Portuguese 4 acts of faith, were public ceremonies during which sentences against the condemned were read. These ceremonies were elaborate and popular spectacles with processions, oaths of obedience to the Inquisition, and sermons. The condemned were afterward turned over to secular, or non-religious, authorities to actually carry out the punishments. Extreme punishments included execution or life imprisonment. Note, the turning over to secular, or non-religious authorities is not true, it is not true. There were Roman Catholic Christians appointed to conduct those tortures and murders in secret. These men were appointed as inquisitors and grand inquisitors in the hierarchy of the said religion. You will see this mentioned below. Spanish Inquisition. Depiction of a Spanish Jew, Israelite, standing before the Grand Inquisitor in the late 1400s. Note, there does exist painting of these auto de fe depicting persons of color. In 1483 the Pope was convinced to authorize the Spanish government to name a Grand Inquisitor to act as head of the Inquisition. The Grand Inquisitor had the power to name deputies and hear appeals, which he did with the assistance of a council of 5. Spanish Inquisition. Illustration depicting 3 women who had been condemned by the Spanish Inquisition. Tomás de Torquemada was the first Grand Inquisitor, and his name became associated with the brutality characteristic of the Inquisition. He issued 28 articles that outlined crimes that could be investigated by inquisitors as well as methods used for interrogation and punishment. Torquemada used torture and the confiscation of property to terrorize and intimidate his victims. An estimated 2,000 people were burned at the stake during Torquemada's tenure as Grand Inquisitor. Torquemada convinced Ferdinand and Isabella to issue the Alhambra Decree on March 31, 1492, which resulted in 160,000 Jews, Israelites, being expelled from Spain. Francisco, Cardinal Jiménez de Cisneros. Francisco, Cardinal Jiménez de Cisneros, named Grand Inquisitor in 1507, promoted the suppression of the Muslim population of Spain with the same zeal that Torquemada had directed at Jews, Israelites. Islam was banned in Spain by decree of Philip III in 1609, and by 1614 some 300,000 Moriscos, or Israelite and more converts, Spanish Muslims who had previously agreed to baptism, were expelled, with tens of thousands executed for refusing expulsion. The Protestant population of Spain was small, but, as it was considered a threat upon the rise of the Reformation, the Inquisition eliminated it as well. Having largely purged the country of Jews, Israelites, and Muslims, as well as many former members of those faiths who had converted to Christianity, the Spanish Inquisition turned its attention to prominent Roman Catholics. Saint Ignatius of Loyola was twice arrested on suspicion of heresy, and the Archbishop of Toledo, the Dominican Bartolomé de Carranza, was imprisoned for almost 17 years. The Supreme Council of the Spanish Inquisition oversaw 14 local tribunals in Spain and several in the Spanish colonies, including in the Americas. A similar inquisition was established in Portugal in 1547, lasting until 1821. Though the excesses seen under Torquemada diminished somewhat, autos de fe continued into the mid-18th century. The Spanish Inquisition was suppressed by Joseph Bonaparte in 1808, restored by Ferdinand VII in 1814, suppressed in 1820, and restored in 1823. It was finally suppressed permanently by Spanish Queen Regent Maria Cristina de Bourbon in 1834. And if you believe that, you're lost with no spiritual understanding. For today, there exist European protests, immigration bans, forced removals, and even incentivized repatriation back to their homelands. The inquisitions across what they call Europe lives on today. Accompanying this section is also a timeline of events in Spain relating to their Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition timeline. 1391. During a time of increasing anti-Semitism in Spain, mobs carry out pogroms in Seville. The Jewish population of the Kingdom of Castile faces the choice between Christian baptism and death. Ferdinand and Isabella. Ferdinand II and Isabella I were the first king and queen of a unified Spain. The marriage of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile unites the Spanish crown. March 14, 1473. 3 days of anti-Semitic riots begin in Córdoba, Castile, against conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity. City authorities fail in protecting the converso community. November 1, 1478. Pope Sixtus IV. Pope Sixtus IV, commemorative medallion by Andrea Guascialotti. Image, courtesy of the National Gallery of Art, Washington, D.C., the Samuel H. Kress Collection. Pope Sixtus IV issues a papal bull authorizing Ferdinand and Isabella to name inquisitors to address the issue of Moranos, people who had converted from Judaism but practiced their faith in secret. Ferdinand and Isabella spread the Inquisition throughout their domains, allowing for persecution of conversos. February 6, 1481. Auto de fe illustration depicting key elements of an auto de fe, or public sentencing, during the Spanish Inquisition. The first auto de fe of the Spanish Inquisition takes place. These public trials of alleged heretics sentence the convicted. Those who are sentenced to death are turned over to secular authorities for execution. October 29, 1484. Tomás de Torquemada. Tomás de Torquemada. Image, courtesy of the Biblioteca Nacional, Madrid. Grand Inquisitor Tomás de Torquemada calls an assembly to standardize the Inquisition. He issues 28 articles that outline crimes that can be investigated by inquisitors as well as methods used for interrogation and punishment. March 31, 1492. Spanish Inquisition. Spanish Jews pleading before King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, while Grand Inquisitor Tomás de Torquemada argues for their expulsion from Spain, in a painting by Solomon A. Hart. Ferdinand and Isabella issue an edict that Spanish Jews have a choice between exile and baptism. As a result, more than 160,000 Jews, Israelites, are expelled from Spain. June 5, 1507. Francisco, Cardinal Jimenez de Cisneros, is named Grand Inquisitor 9 years after Torquemada's death. He pursues the persecution of Moriscos, Israelite and Moor converts, Muslims who have converted to Christianity. April 9, 1609. Philip III signs a decree expelling Moriscos from Spain. July 15, 1834. Spanish Queen Regent Maria Cristina de Bourbon issues a decree abolishing the Spanish Inquisition. Spanish Inquisition causes and effects. Written and fact-checked by the editors of Encyclopaedia Britannica. Causes. The institution of the Spanish Inquisition was ostensibly established to combat heresy. The Spanish kingdom was unified with the marriage of Ferdinand II and Isabella I, and the Inquisition served to consolidate power in the monarchy. The desire for religious unity in the Iberian Peninsula increased toward the end of the Reconquista, or the Reconquest, a series of campaigns by Christian states to recapture territory from the Moors. Anti-Semitism had grown toward Spain's Jewish community. Note this misinformation insertion, they were actually Israelites' communities. During the reign of Henry III of Castile and Leon, and pogroms had forced many to convert to Christianity. Note, pogroms means an organized massacre of a particular ethnic group. Moranos, those who had converted from Judaism to Christianity. Judaism is a conforming to an oral tradition that was later put to writing, which is not the same as obedience and faith of the Israelites, continuing to read, but continued to practice their faith in secret, were increasingly considered a threat to Spanish society. Spaniards were concerned with the idea of limpieza de sangre, Spanish for purity of blood, which the presence of even baptized Jews threatened. Note, what the purity of blood meant was the preservation of Spaniard bloodlines by expressly not intermarrying with Israelites. It also was applied in the most heinous of strategies by having a Spaniard man lie with the wife of non-Spaniards, the Israelites and Moors, before our men consummating their marriages. The result being the potential pregnancies with Spaniard seed amounting to ethnic cleansing to the benefit of the Spaniards. Reading on. The religious fervor of the Catholic monarchs also led to the persecution of Muslims and Protestants. Effects. Hundreds of thousands of Spanish Jews, or Israelites living the land from birth, Muslims, and Protestants were forcibly converted, expelled from Spain, or executed. The Inquisition spread into other parts of Europe and the Americas. Mandatory conversion to Roman Catholicism and expulsion from Spain's territories of people from other religious traditions resulted in a more homogeneous, meaning of the same or a similar kind or nature, Spanish culture. The power of the Spanish monarchy increased. Spain was deprived of many economically active citizens and suffered financially compared to other European powers.
And now let's get into some scriptures. This is Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 2. Behold, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hell and a destroying storm, which is a storm, a tempest, terror, horror. And then the storm is defined as rain shower, thunderstorm, flood of rain, downpour, and rainstorm, as a flood, flood meaning to gush as water, carry away as with a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand of the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 40, verse 9 and 10. Death and bloodshed and strife and sword, which is weapons of war, calamities, famine, tribulation, and the scourge. These things are created for the wicked, and for their sakes came the flood. And the same thing is happening today. Everywhere that you see these heathen Gentiles, principally the leaders among them, Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. Look at where that's happening and tell me you don't see it. Tell me it's not true. So who are the wicked? The wicked are those that the Lord has used to punish the Israelites for our disobedience and all the heirs that were scattered to around the world. Here is the proof in the scriptures. The principal verse is verse 13 of Psalm 17, but we're going to involve the context by starting at verse 8. Keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings. From the wicked that oppress me, from my deadly enemies who compass me about. They are enclosed in their own fat, meaning they're enjoying their wealth. With their mouth, they speak proudly. You see, they think with who they call God for having us as slaves and getting us out of the land back in those times, and they're still doing it today. Verse 11, they have now compassed us in our steps because we're among them. They have set their eyes, which means they attempt to do anything, bowing down to the earth, which means they spread upon the earth. And this is what they did. They came into the lands over there. They took over identities of the people and moved all over what they call present-day Europe, which was called Asia. Verse 12, like as a lion that is greedy of his prey, and as it were a young lion lurking in secret places. Arise, O Lord, disappoint him. And this is what we see today. Cast him down. Deliver my soul from the wicked, which is thy sword. You see, the Lord uses the wicked, these Gentiles, against the Israelites, his own chosen people, for our sins. Verse 14. From men which are thy hand, O Lord, from men of the world, which have their portion in this life. You see, they're only concerned about this. And whose belly thou fillest with thy hid treasure. The hid treasure is a denial of understanding and knowledge, is what it actually is. They are full of children and leave the rest of their substance to their babes, as in an inheritance. Now, we're going to get into this so that you can understand what has happened to the Israelites by these Gentiles. In Baruch chapter 4, verses 25 to 37, it talks about the Israelites are moved to patience, meaning we're told to endure through trials and tribulations. This was thousands and thousands of years ago. And this was BC time, before Mashiach Yahushai's time. Baruch was the understudy to the prophet Jeremiah, so that you can get an idea. Okay, and to hope for the deliverance, you see, and it's been over 2,700 years we've been waiting for deliverance, and we will be delivered. This is Baruch chapter 4, verse 31 to 33. Miserable are they that afflicted thee, and rejoice at thy fall. 32. Miserable are the cities which thy children served. Miserable is she that received thy sons. For as she rejoiced at thy ruin, and was glad of thy fall, so shall she be grieved for her own desolation. You see, this is what's happening in Valencia, Spain, and it's and in other areas of Spain, and all over Europe. Because the Lord is known in judgment. This is Baruch chapter 4 and verse 24. Like as now the neighbors of Zion, which is another word for the Israelites, have seen your captivity, so shall they see shortly your salvation from our power, our God, which shall come upon you with great glory and brightness of the everlasting. So this is telling you that there's salvation for the Israelites. There you do not see any salvation for Gentiles. The salvation coming to the Gentiles are those either unrepentant Israelites in foreign lands or those that did not know who they were, and they were brought to the knowledge of who they were during the missionary journeys of Paul. So I'll leave you in the most capable hands of the Most High Yahweh, B'Hashem, Yahushai.
4 days after floods devastated southeastern Spain, the government is sending 5,000 more troops to the region and another 5,000 police and civil guards, with volunteers mobilizing to help the victims. About 1,700 soldiers are already working to locate dozens of missing people. 211 are known to have died, mostly in and around Valencia, and the death toll is expected to rise. Heavy rains that began on Monday caused floods that have destroyed bridges and covered towns in mud. Communities are cut off and left without water, food, or electricity. Residents have criticized local authorities over the pace of the response and for a lack of warning in advance of the flooding. Journalist Sarah Morris has more from Madrid.
Well, the report in El País, the left-wing newspaper this morning, is saying that 3 million people in Spain are actually live on routes or places where rivers could overflow, and that the planning in the future needs to get better in warning people. Many people saying that alert went out at 8:15 on the Tuesday night, hours after many people had already set off for work, shopping centres, and they found themselves with the water simply flowing into buildings, and that has caused a great deal of anger in Spain. Many people are in some of the villages like Paiporta, where there was at least 70 deaths, saying basically that if volunteers could sludge through the mud with brooms and spades to get to them, why couldn't the soldiers, and that the help from the central government is coming too late.
That's journalist Sarah Morris reporting in Madrid.